Hello and welcome to Draft Day. This is episode 4 of Draft Day, and we have a very special change up of the normal operating procedures here. We have not one but two special guests to cover a sport that we have not covered yet on Draft Day, but we've also only covered the other sports one time each, so probably not that surprising that we're going that route. We are covering the NBA. Before we get to our special guests, I will introduce the voice that you're normally used to hearing after mine on these. Jason, how's it going?
We're doing NBA. I thought this was MLS. Oh gosh,
Well,
this is okay.
luckily for reasons that we'll get into in a little bit, you have you're going last in our rotation, so you have a little bit of time to prepare.
Yeah. Hold on, I'll. But no, I'm happy to be here. I'm exhausted, but you know, this gives me life. So excited to get to it.
Well, that's hopefully this will reinvigorate you. And the draft that we are doing here is probably my personal favorite draft of any sport that I've ever watched. So very excited to do that. The reason that we are doing this particular NBA draft was actually a suggestion by a friend and fan and dare I say admirer of ours by the name of Tyler Cox. Tyler, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. I texted John, I think it was a week and a half ago or so, maybe 2 weeks. And as a fan of the podcast, I was like, "Hey, I can't wait to get to the 2013 NBA draft. Can't wait to listen to it." And next thing I know, I'm getting a text message of, "Hey, we want you to join." So super excited to be here.
Yeah, so part of the reason we have you, one for the wonderful suggestion, but two because I would say NBA is probably Jason and I's like cumulative weakest of the big four sports. Like, not that we
Oh,
aren't like, well, not that we aren't like psychotically knowledgeable compared to like the average human being, but could use a little bit of assistance here. So we have Tyler, who's a big NBA fan. Also, when it came to getting somebody whose NBA knowledge runs extraordinarily deep, we had to bring in our good friend. His name is Adam, but I cannot bring myself to call him Adam. I will be calling him his nickname of P Funk every moment of this draft. P Funk, how's it going?
It's going well. Done my research. Been deliberating on who might be the first pick. Really go one of several ways, but I'm excited to dive in and get started.
I mean, the team that drafted first overall did win an NBA championship just 3 seasons later, so I can understand wanting to go with that same pick, repeat history, go forward from there. But we'll see how that goes. The 2013 draft, though, is completely bananas. I remember watching this live. I remember watching this yesterday just to kind of remind myself of how this went. This was a draft in which, during the time that Cleveland was on the clock, they mentioned 5 different names as a possibility to go number one, none of which were the guy that was actually picked number one. Any of whom probably would have been a better choice than the guy that went number one, but this is also a draft where it's like basically just random luck whether or not your pick hit. And even if they had drafted one of the guys at the very top that they were considering, probably would have been considered a pretty underwhelming number one overall pick. But there are some like truly like spectacular players eventually in this draft. It'll just it'll thin out quickly. I think we can probably safely say.
yeah, definitely going to go off the rails quickly here, and it's one where I personally cannot wait to see where this goes. I can't wait to be corrected 15 times by these wonderful gentlemen that know the sport of basketball better than myself. Probably starting with, I guarantee you I mess up at least 2 names in this podcast. So
I'll spare
fair,
you. I'll likely spare you from having to say at least one of them.
yeah. I frequently mispronounce the name of the guy that is, I would say, the odds-on favorite to go first overall here, despite the fact that I own a shirt with his name on it. I still can't spell it, but I am good enough to like. Go ahead.
No, I said I've played enough Sporkles that I've got it down now. That's pretty much, But there's like it feels like there's a pronunciation window. If you just get in this range, like, all right, well, we can go with that.
Yeah, I mean there's sort of a like a variance because I'm not going to nail it, but I'm also going to say it close enough that people are going to know who I'm talking about. Like you're not going to be confusing whether I'm saying him or like Nikola Jokic. Like you're going to know which one I'm on. But yeah, like I said, this is going to be a crazy draft. This is a draft that's so crazy that we haven't even decided yet how long the draft is going to go. We're going to go at least 4 rounds. Maybe we'll go 6 or 7. Again, we have 4 people, and we're going to be venturing into just like guy that had like one good game at some point. Like if I could somehow draft like Tony Delk's random 50-point game, I would somehow be taking that like in the lottery because, like I said, going to thin out. The way that we decided the draft order here was through. Normally, the way we do it is Jason and I play pool on our phones, and that determines the order. But with 4 people, couldn't really do that. So we all played Immaculate Grid yesterday, and lowest score gets the top pick, so on. We had to make the rule so that it was just the lowest in any sport, because otherwise P-Funk was going to just absolutely murder us. Like I kind of just strive for completion on the NBA grid, and P-Funk usually is getting like you were in double digits, but that's like actually like a somewhat bad day for you. But it was
I
still
was.
good, good enough to earn the top pick here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did the grid.
Go ahead.
The way I did it was so I started off with the baseball grid because I figured that was probably going to be my lowest score because it usually is, and it ended up being. But I decided I would do all of the other grids, including like soccer and WNBA and ones that I knew I was almost certainly not gonna. Even if I got answers right, were not going to be particularly rare. It took me until my second guess to get my total NBA rarity above yours. I did get Broderick Thomas from Truman State University as
Truman
my
State
first name on the board.
legend.
So I got 0.05% there, but then it went downhill quickly.
I am looking at our text thread. I don't even know that we even got an official Jason score on something.
All right,
We
okay.
didn't.
So here's what happened. Essentially, while you guys were having the massive text of saying your scores, I was off work yesterday. So I was out with my wife and 2 small children at the aquarium. And I was like, it's okay. I'm trying to do it. I'm thinking like I had 2.05% in the hockey grid. Like I was cruising along. I think my highest was like a 3%. And then frankly, I was just so exhausted by the end of the day. And I woke up this morning and was like, guess I'm picking 4th.
Yeah, because
You're gonna pay for it.
The last text we got was, "Hey, I'm not done yet," and then we never heard back.
Yeah, this is where I can play the kids. I mean, I play that card on John a lot, probably too much. So,
Well,
But
as
really,
the
I mean, I'm perfectly content with you not doing it because that meant that I got a better draft pick. So
I mean,
well, for just some transparency, as the honorary NBA expert tonight, my lowest score was baseball. So maybe this is the wrong draft for me.
we'll get you on a baseball one sometime. I mean, I think we could just pull out a baseball one right now. And aside from the fact that baseball drafts aren't famous enough that we'd have to like look up the list, we could probably just rattle it off. But for now, though, we are on to the 2013 National Basketball Association Draft. P-Funk, you are on the clock. The number 1 overall pick in real life was Anthony Bennett out of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Will he be going number 1 right here?
In short, no.
Okay.
I will. So I always have softball on Thursdays, so I'm always following the draft via my phone. And I'm dead serious when I say I looked at my phone, I saw Anthony Bennett. I'm like, who is this guy? I had done, OKC was good, so like I didn't really like research the draft necessarily. So part of it was ignorance, but I legitimately did not have any clue who Anthony Bennett was. So that was definitely a shocker. What's not shocking is I will be taking Giannis Antetokounmpo with the number 1 overall pick.
Whoa.
I know.
Shocking. I didn't see that coming.
I've heard good things about this Greek prospect. Like he might do big things. Maybe win a title and a couple MVPs or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I definitely. Yeah, this really isn't shocking. Obviously, we knew Giannis would go number one. P-Funk can get into all the accolades if he wants to, but I think going back to 2013, we were hearing this name of this kid over in Greece, and we're watching these grainy YouTube videos of YMCA, like not even a YMCA gym. I don't even know what kind of gym those were. And he just looked better than everybody. And we didn't see it then. We're just like, oh, it's just because Greece doesn't have good basketball players. That's why this guy looks so freakishly athletic. Granted, it took Giannis a couple years to find his feet in the NBA. It was a big jump from competition. But when he finally arrived, I believe year 4 was when he really took off. Then it was just a matter of how high is this guy's ceiling going to go.
Yeah, I remember year 1. He definitely wasn't like what he would become, but there were at least like some signs of like, this guy seems like this really young guy that got drafted, kind of growing into his body a little bit. Looks like he might be something. Like he was better than Anthony Bennett from day 1, but then he became better than everybody else in the draft in subsequent days. Going to go on a limb and guess that everyone had him number 1 on their boards, but Funk, if you want to further address your expertise in selecting him, you can go right ahead.
Well, yeah, kind of touched on what Tyler was saying. Year 4, if you look at his page, his position officially listed on Basketball Reference, his rookie year, he was a small forward. His second year, he was a shooting guard. His third year, and I remember this one, kid had him playing point guard. And then back to small forward. And finally, once, his landing spot was a power forward in the NBA. But with his skill set and length, size, quickness, I mean, basically, trial and error, he was just playing different positions for years to kind of get a feel for every little bit. That's why his game, I feel like, really took off, and he can do a little bit of everything. As he was thrown in the fire doing different things for years under Kidd, who I know he credits with a lot of his development. So, obviously a pretty incredible story. And like you said, not like he was alone, but yeah, he was better out of the jump from number 1 overall pick, Anthony Bennett, who, a little fun fact, he was 36th in this draft in minutes played. The number 1 overall pick.
It's one thing to have like bad like VORP or bad counting stats or something, but like minutes, you would think that just being the number 1 pick would guarantee you like 5 or 6 years. Because usually if you're talking about like a bust at number 1, you're thinking like Michael Olowokandi or Kwame Brown or these guys that like even Darko to some extent like eventually kind of found his level as like a rotation big man who like certainly shouldn't have been drafted so highly, but like had something. And Anthony Bennett was just like damaged goods immediately.
I feel like we need like a more in-depth story from somebody on what exactly went on there. But yeah, it's just one spot behind Jeff Withey in minutes played for that draft.
Shout out to Jeff Withey.
Yep. Figure Tyler would enjoy that one.
Jeff Withey, big fan of the show, I think. So glad to have you listening, Jeff.
Tyler's such a nice guy that even though he's a Kansas basketball fan, we still hang out with him. But we'll see if the Kansas fan drafts Ben McLemore next with the number 2 pick. As the person going after you, I'm not going to argue against it if you want to, but I'll let you.
Well, since you stole my Jeff, not stole, but the Jeff Withey segue kind of has, died out a little bit. I think I'll just go ahead and just take another center in this draft. I think he was the 27th pick overall in this draft. Also a guy that had a slow start to his career, maybe a little slower than Giannis, where I personally saw him in his first 2 years and was just like, yeah, this guy's just not going anywhere. That would be
27th overall pick, yeah.
Yeah, Rudy Gobert. I remember playing 2K back in the day in post-college, and this guy's like a 52 overall in 2K in like year 2. And even then I was judging him off his 2K score, which is obviously, look at the resume now, 3-time defensive player of the year, 3-time all-star, rebounds just skyrocketed over the years, where he is now like a consistent 16, 17 point, 15 rebound guy, leads the league in blocks. He's been a stalwart defensively for Utah when they were making their playoff runs back with Donovan Mitchell to now with the Timberwolves, where one could argue he's probably the most important big man on that current team. So
Certainly.
I think Gobert number 2, he's distant to Giannis, but he is a legitimate force in the league right now.
Yeah, I think that Rudy Gobert, this might be a little bit of I'm not even sure if I totally believe this take, but I think he actually might be an easier pick at number 2 than Giannis at 1. Like, there's that big of a gap, which I'm saying to make excuses for the drop-off that I'm going to have with the number 3 pick. But, I mean, obviously a guy who is, like, if Rudy Gobert's probably not going to be the best player on a championship team just because his offensive game isn't, like, what Giannis's is, but, like, defensively is just such an incredibly significant player. And now that he's kind of gone past being viewed of as just like that guy from Utah that created COVID, he can just become the sort of the centerpiece, no pun intended, of the Timberwolves, and allowing Karl Anthony Towns to have more of an outside game, which is like, he kind of, to steal the line from Bomani Jones, like, Karl Anthony Towns is a tall man, not a big man, and Rudy Gobert has that sort of big man. And I don't really have a whole lot to add. He's really good at what he does. He maybe doesn't do as many things as Giannis, but what he does do, he's extremely good at.
Yeah, I actually had a similar thought. I think you went a little bit further than I was willing to go. But yeah, I think the gap between 1 and 2 and the gap between 2 and 3 is pretty similar here. And to Tyler's point, I don't think it's even much of a debate that he's the most important big man on the Minnesota Timberwolves. But I also say that as a pretty strong Karl Anthony Towns detractor who just put up 50 points in the All-Star game and seemed to be the only one who cared because he just knew, hey, free points, which is all he really does. He's all about the garbage bucket. So, yeah, Rudy Gobert, easy number 2 pick. 1 and 2 on my board were pretty easy. Debate started after that. So,
yeah, I'm a little surprised that you haven't gone more full-throated, getting into the, like, All-Star game as a sham discourse just so you can take shots at Karl Anthony Towns. But maybe big picture, it's not
the
not
discourse. It's all over the place. I don't know. I need regular games again. Now we got this whole, JJ Redick, Austin Rivers, Doc Rivers. It's just that kind of whole beast playing out today, and it's just it feels kind of manufactured almost to a degree. Yeah, the discourse that is around everything that is not regular season games right now is just like not interesting to me, and I just want to get back to real basketball.
We'll get there soon, and then we'll see. I mean, I think Rudy Gobert, I don't think he's going to pass Giannis anytime soon, but I think he has a chance with his Timberwolves team to kind of solidify his number 2 spot even further. But in the meantime, I have the number 3 overall pick, so I will once again be selecting a guy that had no chance whatsoever of going number 1 in this draft. No all NBA teams from this guy, but number 10 overall pick, I'm going to go with CJ McCollum. He was drafted by the Portland Trail Blazers, plays for the New Orleans Pelicans now. Just generally speaking, like a solid scorer. He's averaged, whenever I pulled the stats, it may have changed slightly, but he was at 19.4 points per game for his career. Second to Giannis in the class. Doesn't necessarily have that sort of two-way versatility of, the very top guys, but, somebody that I think that you get him in the right situation, which honestly, and this is the biggest if of the century, but if Zion Williamson could stay healthy, then like having him as that kind of guard option with like a big man of Zion's potential that he's shown when he's played, like I think that he could sort of take to another level. And I mean, to be clear, he's a distant third on my board, and my gap between 3 and 4 is not enormous, but I'm perfectly happy to have CJ in my corner.
Yeah, I'll keep it pretty short on CJ. Shout out to CJ for busting the bracket wide open back in college when he took Lehigh over Duke. That made me super happy at that time in my life.
As a,
So
and as a
Nothing else
Mizzou fan,
happened
I was
that day.
super happy.
Nothing else happened that day. Nope.
yeah. With that being said, I'll just share this one little thing about him that I found interesting. So he's another guy keeping with the theme of started slow, and then year 3 he got most improved player. Since most improved player year up to year to date, he's a 46, 40, 81 shooter. At the end of the day, we can question maybe his defense, or can you win with him as like a 2 or as a number 2 guy. But overall, the guy he's buckets, and he's going to continue to do that until, I don't know. How old is he now? Anybody know? Was he 34? Because I'm assuming he was like a 3 or 4 year starter at Lehigh.
That's right. 32.
He's still got a couple more years left in him, shooting out a high clip like that.
Yeah, I mean he's at 42% this year. So yeah, I mean CJ to me, I guess, is just the poster child of a really good player that's not quite an all-star.
Yeah.
And I think we also saw, kind of Tyler alluding to, was he a 2? I mean, Portland advanced 1 year where it was kind of they got an OKC team that just couldn't put it together. And they eked out against Denver. They go to the conference finals and get swept by the Warriors. And they made no noise after that. It's just obviously it's tough when you have 2 guards that don't defend to win with those 2 guards. I think they waited probably 2 years too late splitting those 2 guys up. I wish the Pelicans, he would be better off having more defense around him, I still think. And Zion's really not that, but the Pelicans, and there's a lot of teams I'm watching. The Pelicans, I'm really curious on what they can do in the playoffs and see what they, if they can advance, if everybody's healthy. Like you said, the Zion thing's as big of an if as there is. But if he's healthy and if they're all ready and playing, I'm really intrigued by what they can do in the playoffs. And I think CJ would be a big part of that.
Yeah, I will say that with the whole CJ and Damian Lillard thing, this was a thing that during the draft they were talking about, like even before it became clear Portland was going to take him, of just like him being, is he the next Damian Lillard? Because Lillard was coming off Rookie of the Year, he had gone to Weber State, and CJ McCollum was coming out of Lehigh, so that similar type of player type thing. CJ McCollum also, he certainly was the first player in that draft, and probably the first player in any draft in any sport to quote started from the bottom by Drake while being interviewed, which was extremely not the last player, because that was like for a couple of years, like every single player, and probably like I think Austin Rivers was the year before, but like guys who were like Nepo babies were doing the started from the bottom thing. But he at least went to Lehigh, so he's probably got a more credible claim to it than most.
Yeah, Austin, I don't know exactly where you want to put Austin Rivers as starting, but the bottom was not it. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Started from a second round playoff exit. Now we're here. All right. Jason, you are up. Hopefully you have found some NBA players.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I was really hoping you'd reach on somebody at 3 and I give him a call. Otherwise, I'm like, gosh. Like, I have my list, but it's coin flip at this point for me. There's like 4 or 5 guys here that I'm like, well, I can justify any of these, and I can't say I'm happy with any of them either.
The good news is, if it makes you feel any better, I'm in the same boat. So,
yeah, I mean, and I think I'm going to go with the guy who honestly just, it surprised me, the career he's had. And I'll, speaking of, hey, Lehigh upsetting Duke, I'll take the Duke guy at 4. I'm going to take Mason Plumlee at 4.
Interesting.
Mostly because, you look at his stats, it doesn't jump off, but if I have a guy who I know is over an 11-year career, at the time I pull this, going to give me 8.5, 6.8, and 2.5 a game. I mean, the way that the NBA draft can go, and with the other names in this, obviously we'll get to other names. There was another, 3-4 guys that I was looking at, but ultimately what it boiled down to, it's just kind of consistency, not necessarily the ups, the downs. You get a solid big guy. Shame that it's just one Plumlee, but we do what we are playing with here. And frankly, I'm not steeped enough in the lore to know the good or bad against it, and it's just a gut feeling at the end of the day. Let's be honest. So
Hey,
He is
I'm actually
4th
going.
and 4.
Yeah, I'm actually going to defend Jason on this one because I had Plumlee pretty high because when I really dug into the numbers, taking in longevity, in this draft class, he's 4th in rebounds, 5th in assists, 3rd in field goal percentage, 4th in win shares, 4th in VORP. He's played the 3rd most games, 8th most minutes, and he's a top 10 in points. Statistically, compared to the other guys, a lot of the other guys we're going to get to flamed out. They had like a moment and then boom, gone, or they battled injuries. Plumlee, at the end of the day, he's always been relatively healthy. He's a good passer for a big man, and he keeps the ball moving. So I don't think Plumlee is he's definitely not a negative to a team. So looking at where we're at now in the history, at the time, maybe in 2013, yeah, taking him at 4th would have been just absolutely absurd. But with where we're at now, he keeps moving up the board.
Yeah, I had him 6th on my board, so it's not like I think it's in like an outrageous reach. Probably a little bit of just Plumlee fatigue. I probably underrate him because of that. It's a little bit like whenever the Houston Texans didn't draft Derek Carr because the whole David Carr shadow looming, but it's a defensible pick just because like he's I think clearly a step down from the other picks so far, but Jason didn't have an opportunity of those guys, and this draft starts to fall off a cliff.
And it's only my fault.
All right, that was I have him in 11th honestly on my board, but like,
oh wow,
there's just so much. We can get into that later, I guess.
But I mean, I think at this point we're going to see it's purely going to fall. It falls into preference. I think after the kind of
crazy. I mean, there's not a whole lot. I guess so. I'll make my pick. My pick's going to be Steven Adams.
That's who I was fighting between. That's my 5. So it was between those two.
And I just there is some bias here as a Thunder fan, of course. But and funny enough, the Adams Giannis fit, he doesn't shoot like Brook Lopez, but defensively, there's a lot of similarities there of what Brook Lopez does for the current day Bucks. That I end up with a nice little fit right there. Yeah, just one of the better offensive rebounders of this century. Screen setter extraordinaire, finishes around the basket, solid defender, great team locker room guy. It's a lot to like. Obviously, right now, kind of to speak to the longevity of Plumlee, who's still going, I do have some concerns on how much, how much can, because it just feels like he's kind of on this decline where the injuries keep racking up. He had the knee injury last year. He tries to rest. Now he's having surgery this year. He's out. Those start, another player in this draft class, Victor Oladipo, had something similar happen, and he has not got back on track. So,
yeah.
The Plumlee pick, I mean, I get it. Again, part of this is bias on my end for I watched a lot of Steven Adams games. So certainly I like that pick. I had him at 5th on my board anyway, so it works out.
Aside from, obviously the on-court accomplishment, I mean, Steven Adams is just a fun pick because he's just a fun dude to watch play basketball. Like, I mean, I remember, just like the way he plays, it's kind of that like, I don't know. To me, it's almost like playing, pickup ball the way that he plays sometimes, where it's just nose to the grind. But then the way he's developed it over time, as he gets older and stuff, I've noticed that his game, it's changed and he's adapted well. Like before researching this, like I didn't realize, he had as many points as he did, honestly, because for the longest time, I just was like, oh, he's a defensive stopper. He's going to knock you on your butt, but then help you up and say something to you at Maori. I don't know. I'm done talking. Somebody else can talk.
Well,
yeah,
I was gonna
go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I'll keep mine short because with Steven Adams, the thing I found interesting about him is, as me and P Funk are both big Thunder fans, and early in his career and even just a few years back, I mean, he was like he's a Thunder favorite. He's like basically a legend in his own right in that community. The thing that really stood out to me was if I remember the statistic right, is that he's played in 200 since his rookie year, since his second year, not counting his rookie year. He's played in 265 games. He started 261 of those. So what that speaks to me is like the guy, when healthy, is good. He's a starter. And that means something when we're doing the draft, that you are immediately looking at this guy going, he's going to start. And he's played in multiple cities now where it's not just, oh, well, Oklahoma City loved him. No, he's been in Memphis, New Orleans. I think it's the only places, right? Cool. And he just starts. When he's healthy, he starts. When he's not healthy, well, he's where everyone else is at.
Yeah, Memphis completely fell apart, in part because they did not have him last year in the playoffs, and the Lakers grabbed every rebound possible. He is now actually a member of the Houston Rockets. Memphis did trade him for, as they would have, the aforementioned Victor Oladipo, who's just a contract at this point. But they were able to, they got off, Memphis got off some money and got some picks out of that. So a little kind of small bookkeeping deal, if you will. But yeah, like you said, Steven Adams is, anywhere he's gone, not just OKC, he's been the anchor in the middle for the team he's on. I know Zion liked having him as the big man that did the dirty work. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not a dirty work guy. So that's where Adams and him worked out well. Adams was the dirty work guy down low. Jaren Jackson Jr. could roam around, float, weak side shot blocker. That pairing worked out well. And we'll see if he can, hopefully continue. As somebody who doesn't like the Houston Rockets, it pains me to say this, but hopefully he does get back next year and is able to play some basketball.
Well, I'm going to take the moment. Yeah, I'm going to take the moment to, I don't really want to do this because I think there are other guys I really like on my board. Man, it's hard. It's Oladipo at 6. I know he's flamed out. I know the injuries have piled up, but it is so hard to overlook what he did in 2017-18, where he just racked up the accolades. He was on his way to becoming one of the best two-way players in the NBA, and he played after that injury. He played in 5 years, 138 games. He just can't stay healthy, and teams are just hoping that maybe they'll get like one more healthy run out of Oladipo, and it just never pans out. And so for that 2017-18 season, that's all I'm going to sit on. All-star, first-team defense, All-NBA third, most improved player, led the league in steals, took the Pacers as the guy to 5th in the Eastern Conference. He was on his way. He had a lot of he was like at that time he was getting a lot of D-Wade comparisons, and it just didn't work out. But it's hard for me not to take the flash in the pan of maybe if I'm drafting a team, like, man, maybe if we can just sneak one in like those first 4 years.
Yeah, that was the next guy on my board. Like you said, obviously you're not really projecting a lot for him going forward because of, like P-Funk said, he's a contract at this point. But, somebody that was, the only guy remaining on the board who had made an All-NBA team, a guy that, even in some of his, like, lesser years was like, if you had like him coming off the bench or something, would be a solid player to have as like an energy guy. And, one of many, and this is the first guy that's been drafted that was like a realistic possibility to go number 1 in this draft. And it would have been a little bit underwhelming if Cleveland had gotten Victor Oladipo as a number 1 overall pick. But, a guy that, at number 6, I think is a much more defensible choice. And, if you're only going to get a few years out of him, at this stage in the draft, you're not banking on this guy being a franchise player. You're just trying to get what you can get.
Yeah, I think, pointing to Tyler's point about that 17-18 season, I think you can argue that outside of Giannis, that is the single best individual season of anybody in this draft. And I honestly I had him 4th on my board, and I skipped him. I took Adams. Just because I don't know what to, like, you have this peak, and then you have the valleys are quite low. And I didn't know. I felt like Adams was a little bit more consistent across the board, so I went with that. But you can't argue with Oladipo. And because I remember he got traded, and a lot of people said, "Oh, he can't play with Russ," and then he busts out and credits Russ and playing that 1 year with Russ and seeing Russ's work ethic. and he was like, "Man, I need to change what I'm doing." You could actually already see in the workout videos leading up to the draft, and it was kind of exciting as a fan to see that. You trade for Paul George. I mean, that's just more exciting. It is what it is. But then we saw the fruits of that in that 17-18 season. It was unbelievable, and it is unfortunate that he kind of got derailed from there.
Is he the most? If you asked a casual sports fan and showed him a list of all the draftees, is he the second most notable name on this list behind Giannis?
It's honestly, Gobert messing up COVID, man. I bet he's up there.
That's fair.
There's a non-zero chance that my mom knows who Rudy Gobert is and doesn't know who Giannis is, which sounds completely insane, but that's what happens when you're not a basketball fan, but you watch a lot of cable news, I guess. But
I don't know. So Giannis, Gobert, Oladipo. I don't even know who would be fourth after that. There's a lot of nondescript individuals.
I think McCollum is like not anonymous, even if he's a shade below some of the other guys.
Yeah, that's probably true. Adams got some pub being on some good teams at times too.
What we're forgetting about Oladipo is his time at Indiana was electric. So there's a lot of people who don't watch the association but love college kids running up and down the court, and there would be the overlap. So those fans would know who Oladipo is even more so than a Gobert.
True.
Do we get to count Tim Hardaway Jr. for name recognition since Tim Hardaway has a famous name? Or okay, I just thought I'd try it.
Spoiler alert.
Wow, took one right off Jason's board.
Tim Hardaway Jr. is not number 7 on my board, so Jason can still get him if he wants it. Number 7, I'm going to go with a player that has personally frustrated me numerous times as a sensible fan of the Chicago Bulls via 2 trades, one to bring him in and one to send him out that have not worked out amazingly. I'm going to go with Otto Porter Jr., number 3 overall pick. Ended up not being like necessarily the star level player that a lot of people hoped he would be coming out, but he's just generally a pretty decent player in terms of his career numbers. He's 10.3 a game points is it's kind of, I guess, speaks to the quality of this draft that he's going number 7, but just a guy that's been, I think, was dramatically overpaid for a while and was like part of like sort of the Bulls' collective general delusion of believing that they're one player away, and then repeating that with Vucevic, which was part of the trade that sent him out of Chicago. But before I derail and just complain about how stupidly run the Bulls have been basically since they decided they were going to build around the corpse of Rajon Rondo, I'm going to defer to others. Not 100% convinced that Porter's the right pick here, but I can't say that there's anybody else on here that I'm just really itching for. So,
I had
sure, number 3 overall pick. Okay.
Yeah, I had him 9 on mine. So
13.
Crazy. I mean, I think he's a guy that I guess I'll have to tell the story of why I've been pulling. I was pulling for this guy even when he was in high school. Very highly touted prospect. Obviously wanted him to go to Mizzou. He picked Georgetown. But my dad actually played high school basketball against his father, Otto Porter Sr. Keep in mind, if I know John knows how, my dad was as athletic in high school as he is today. So Yikes. it was not close when they played in the small schools in Southeast Missouri that they attended. But whenever you have that type of thing, I think or you get a guy that it seems like for me the guys from like Southeast Missouri were always more hyped up to me because I have a lot of family down there. Tyler Hansbrough was another one that was very kind of pumped up to me, who I went to watch multiple high school games of his and things of that nature. But then I went when visiting my grandparents. I drove down to go watch a random, like when he was a junior, to go watch Otto play and stuff. So it's he was a guy, but like honestly, I won't lie. The first thing I think of him in the NBA is the Shaq in a Fool moment, where he like just stands there as his guy runs away from him around the entire court and just stop playing defense. So that's that's kind of my what I think of with him. It's not what you want to think of, but
I had a really hard time grading him because I've just never been a Porter Jr. fan. His game doesn't. I mean, it's fine, but then you go look at some of the statistics, and you're like, I mean, the guy did put up some points per game years that are really good for this draft class. But I also felt like he played on some just meh teams. I mean, Washington is just a meh basketball organization, so that's just where a lot of players just go to. I don't know. I hate to say it like this, but rot, and then just hope they get out in time to where they still have a career left. I don't know. He's just.
Yeah,
I think that's why he's at 10.
yeah, and even with those Washington teams, he was like at best the third best player on any of them. It was not like he was. This wasn't like he was some guy who was putting up, even if it was like sort of empty calorie kind of numbers. He was just sort of there. But I can say at least with confidence that there's nobody that Jason's going to say right here where I'm going to be just absolutely crushed that I didn't get him, because we have fallen off a cliff, and like now I'm part of me's wanting to go as long as possible on this draft because it's going to get really silly really quick.
Yeah.
Porter
Go
had
ahead.
basically had 2 elite shooting seasons. And then this was a period of time where the Nets had a bunch of cap space. They were doing this. They made the terrible trade with the Celtics. They have no picks. So they're doing this thing where they were signing people to ridiculous offer sheets that most of these teams matched and should not have. And one of those was Otto Porter making $25 million a year in that NBA was a nice chunk of change. It's not quite, 25 is not as much in the cap now, but and then of course proceeds to fall off a cliff. But I guess John's Bulls thought they could save him, as he kind of mentioned before. That did not happen. So I kind of like what Tyler said. I just had a hard time grading him, So I can't, we have fallen off the cliff. You can pretty well take your pick of a number of guys at the spot, so I don't hate it. And maybe, in this redraft world, maybe Porter doesn't earn his knee. Maybe he has 6 elite shooting seasons. So I get the pick.
Does he get any credit for the 15 games started for the champion Golden State Warriors a couple years ago?
He played a role in that team, so that does get him some points.
All right, Jason, you're up.
All right. Number 8. Like you said, the cliff has fallen. I'll take the 6th man specialist. I'll go with Dennis Schroeder at 8.
Schroeder.
Yeah, I didn't know if I went American, didn't want to necessarily go full German, as I'm fluent in. Not really, but guy who maybe his 2 of his better years were the 2 he had in OKC, coming off as the 6th man, finished 2nd in 6th man of the year voting in 1920. He was awfully good, and I remember him for whatever reason. Like, his small stints with the Lakers always just stick out for some reason, and how he played. But a guy who's averaging 14 points a game for his career, he's going to come off, just give you the stats. What, almost 5 assists a game, almost 1 steal a game. You can't. At this point in the draft, you're just looking for somebody who's serviceable. And if you have a guy that can, be, throughout his career at times, like an elite first guy off the bench in terms of the rest of the NBA. When Otto Porter Jr. is the other ones around you, I think this is the way I had to go with this pick.
I had him at 12 on my board, but the only reason I have him dropped that low is I had to weigh. I think he's a bad teammate. I don't think he's a good locker room guy personally. I always feel like there's something going on. I don't know.
Yeah,
people like you can maybe you can describe what I'm trying to say a little bit, but I feel like there's a reason the guy has bounced around. It always seems maybe he's the scapegoat. Maybe it was from those Lakers teams. Maybe someone had to take some blame. I don't know, but yeah, the numbers are there. I think he's a really good player, and when he's in the right role, like he is great, or he's that great in that role. But he's not a guy you're going to want being like, "Hey, you're going to be our primary ball handler."
Yeah, you're not entirely like so. He leaves. Atlanta couldn't wait to get rid of him, and that was when they drafted Trae Young. They didn't want Dennis Schroeder anywhere near him, so that was the Schroeder Melo trade. He was fine in OKC though, and then they traded him to the Lakers. Lakers was so. I remember when he signed with the Celtics, and that went poorly, and they could not wait to get rid of that dude. And then they trade him. That was the season they made the finals, and they just traded him for just anything. Please get out of our locker room. So you're not entirely off base there. So I had him at, I believe, 6. So I get, I don't think you're off base docking him for bad teammate stuff, though. I get that.
Yeah, I had him at 14, but honestly, like 10 through 15 is all pretty interchangeable. So can't say it's exactly not going to crush the pick. I feel like eventually we're going to go long enough that somebody that's not even on my board gets picked. We're not at that point yet. So
I feel like this is the point in the draft where like the conversations are going to get shorter and shorter.
It's about to get nasty.
Is it my pick now?
It is.
Number 9, it's all you, P-Funk.
It's good spicy. Robert Covington.
Oh my God.
He goes with the undrafted.
He was next on my board.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's funny because he's actually 9 on my board, but I just skipped 2 guys on my board.
Oh man.
Which I also had, like I said, I had Depot 4th, and I skipped him to take Adams. So yeah, Robert Covington, Tennessee State. The process, the face of the process before Embiid, really. Yeah, undrafted guy. Obviously, the reactions kind of point to it. Everybody had him up next, apparently. Defensive specialist. 3. I feel like one of the poster childs of 3-and-D. Like this guy would spot up in the corners, hit threes, and just defended
Very
them.
much so.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I know they didn't want to trade him to Philadelphia. He ends up in Houston. He was with that Russ Harden team that was kind of interesting and playing really small. He's bounced around a bit since then. I don't know. I think he's on the Clippers now. Or he might be back in, you know what? He might be back in Philly. He might have been in that Harden trade, actually. So yeah.
I thought he was on Philly, but you would know better than I would.
He's had like several Philly stints. It's actually just kind of hilarious at this point. But yeah, he is back on Philly. He's back in that rotation. Yeah, just an ultimate team guy. Hustles, takes the shots given to him, but doesn't demand a whole lot. My team doesn't have a whole lot of shooting, but we'll worry about that later.
Well, to be fair, you're not really drafting a team. You're just drafting.
Yes, and it's fun to think about. I did consider this fake team of mine. If I wanted to draft for fit, I was like, I'm just going to go pick Covington.
I think we're just drafting like guys like for spot in the draft.
Covington
at 9 is a good guy to have just because, if we're doing like an NFL redraft, number 9 is like a quasi franchise player, and number 9 in an NBA draft. If you're getting a guy who's a role player, who's like a 3-and-D type guy, like you mentioned, that's kind of all you really need.
You'll take that.
Like that's easy to justify.
Yeah, as you guys saw my reaction, I'm a huge Bob Covington fan. A huge. He's as people call him a 3-and-D guy. I say he's a D-and-3 guy. That guy was nasty defensively and also good at the 3. Weirdly enough, I was in college in Tennessee when he was playing, so like I got some of this weird like Tennessee State crossover. And he was kind of already like on my radar, weirdly enough. But I'm not sitting here like saying like, oh, I think the guy should have been drafted in the first round. But I was like, this guy he scores in college. He's averaging like, I think it was his junior year, averaged like 2 steals and 2 blocks a game while shooting 45% from 3. I'm a firm believer that if you're putting up numbers like that at any level collegiately, there's a place for you in the league because you're just gonna figure it out. I don't really have anything to say. He was all defense first team, and he finished top 5 in defensive player of the year. I forget what year it was, 2017, 2018. I think he's a winner, and he was a key factor in some of those Sixers playoff teams. So I'm big on him.
Yeah, unfortunately, you don't get to draft him though. So
I don't. He was my next one. I was
Number
sitting there
10.
thinking, no, there's no way P Funk's going to take Bob Covington.
It is interesting that he was fourth in DPOI voting in 16-17, but did not make an all-defense team that year. Right.
That is
I
a
think it's probably because of the name. All right. Well, my board just got rocked.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Anybody else got thoughts on Covington before I select number 10?
And there were many years I wanted him on OKC. Sure, I'm not alone in that in this podcast.
All right. If we're moving on, I don't love any of this. Kelly Olynyk.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spend too much time on it. He's a 48, 37, 80 career guy. I think he has winning qualities to him. I think he's a good locker room guy. I don't know. I think teams want him. He provides some veteran oomph to playoff teams. Here we are. I don't really have anything else to say. He just.
I feel like
you either have seen Kelly Olynyk play and see what he does, or you haven't. And if you haven't, I don't blame you because it's Kelly Olynyk. So, but I like him at 10.
I feel like I crushed your spirit with that Covington pick.
I thought I had a steal because I didn't want to have to pick anybody until 15 or 14.
No, I got a couple guards wings that I'm going to see if one of them happens to drop to me. Yeah, I had Olynyk in this range. I was kind of hoping our Thunder picked him up. I'm not entirely sure why Toronto in the lottery paid a first-round pick to get him, but it is the locker room stuff. Everywhere he goes, that team seems to overperform. You know, he was on the Celtics for years where they overperformed expectations. This Utah team for the last couple of years has played over their heads, and he's been a big part of that. So, yeah, everything you said about good team guy, good team player, passes the ball, shoots it, just one of those guys that I think it was an old Simmons thing where, you know, he puts a lot of things on the table, doesn't take much off it. I think that's what Kelly Olynyk does for a team.
Yeah, it's ironic that you mentioned Simmons because on the draft broadcast, Bill Simmons was furious about this. Whenever he wasn't drafted by the Celtics, but whenever he was traded to the Celtics that night, he was not feeling Kelly Olynyk. But I guess he eventually probably changed his tune a little bit, and also he was the number 13 pick. He can't realistically be like if your number 13 pick becomes like a contributor, you're doing pretty well with it.
The guy he was traded for, I'm going to have to open his page to figure out how to pronounce his name. And he did not do much of anything. Lucas Nogueira. It was Olynyk drafted by the Mavs, traded by the Mavs for the Celtics for this Lucas guy in 2 seconds. So, you know, to Cleveland Anthony early, I remember that name, but
yeah,
traded for 3 guys that didn't do anything.
A good college player who I remember him from college, and that's I guess he's been on the Knicks for a while, but yeah.
Would Clee Anthony early have been drafted if his name was not Clee Anthony? I say no.
He got drafted because of those Wichita State teams. That was the team that went undefeated with Ron Baker.
Yeah.
We are officially some guys.
I'm going to say that he would have still gone, but Clee Anthony early would have been Clee Anthony later.
I'm out.
So we have a mixed reaction. Jason looks angry. P-Funk is like politely laughing, and Tyler just looks confused, which is honestly all reasonable, I think. This is going to prepare you guys to go after my pick probably here. So this is number 11. Kind of surprised at number 11 I'm going with a guy that I've bestowed a nickname upon in my life, but I'm going to go with Contavious Caldwell-Goat, also known as Contavious Caldwell-Pope. A little bit along the lines of the kind of a poorer version of Robert Covington to me. He's got sort of 3-and-D type tendencies, was a good player for the Nuggets title team last year. Just, steady. I don't actually even remember the origin of me calling him Contavious Caldwell GOAT. I think it was somebody trying to argue like rings, and I was just like, well, he got a ring, so clearly he's better than John Stockton or whoever. But yeah, this is the extent of commentary that I'm probably going to have the rest of the draft. But he was a player that I honestly don't remember a second of in college, even though he played at Georgia. So you would think that as a Mizzou fan, he'd have like some SEC knowledge, but I don't remember that at all. But has had a decent career. Probably not exactly what you want out of a number 8 pick, but also a good enough contributor at this point that I don't think you would quite call him a bust either. So,
Hey, all I know is I'm always going to appreciate a guy who's got a work ethic like KCP. The man showed up to work with an ankle bracelet on and hooped. What more can you ask?
There was that stretch there. I think it was one of his Lakers years where he could only play home games.
Correct.
Like a period of time. I do remember that. Yeah, his Detroit years were like just not good, honestly. And then I guess he goes to LA and figures out how to shoot threes and wins ring with LA. LA just kind of unceremoniously dumps him. He was in the Russ trade, that's what it was, which is completely ill-fated. It was a bad idea from the jump. And then was key on the Denver team too. It was between KCP and Covington. And frankly, I just thought the Covington pick was more fun. Tyler's reaction alone was certainly worth making that pick, so I have no regrets.
Correct. Yeah.
But yeah, KCP's a good pick here.
So John, then I just have one question for you. You down with KCP?
This feels a little too obvious.
Yeah,
now that I'm remembering the ankle bracelet time, I'm not sure if I would necessarily answer that question on a recorded audio medium, but
hey,
I picked up what he was laying down.
I mean, it wasn't too hard. Yeah. So are we going to me here?
Yeah, as John said, we're going to have less and less.
Yeah, I mean, so you know what? It's kind of funny. We made the joke earlier. I'll take the guy that you joked that I was going to write his name down earlier. I'll take Timmy Jr. I'll take Tim Hardaway Jr. here.
Yeah,
a guy who, a guy who honestly, if you look at him, like as far as guys that can shoot in this draft, I'd say streakiest of the shooters in this draft. And I mean, if he had any sort of consistency from behind the arc, maybe a guy that goes higher in this draft, if I'm being completely honest. But serviceable point guard, has over 10,000 career points. So I mean, I don't know what else you say. He's not his dad, but serviceable.
He has found his calling as being alongside a offensive hub in Luka. That's just Luka's going to do Luka, and if he needs you to shoot the ball, he's going to throw it to you, and you better shoot it. Tim Hardaway Jr. is not going to hesitate to shoot that thing. So he was on the Knicks. He gets traded to the Hawks, then traded back to the Knicks. Then he was in that Porzingis deal, and he's been in rumors a few times about getting traded. I think the fit's good for both sides. He's not an overly expensive player, good shooter, spaces the floor, good enough defensively, I guess, in a team scheme at least. I like the pick.
This is where I had Hardaway Jr. was at. I think I had him 13. So I'm fine with this. Although Hardaway Jr. is one of those guys, I got an anti-bias with him where all I ever see or think about when I think of Hardaway Jr. is just ridiculously long 3-pointers from the wing that are just like, sometimes they go in and sometimes they're off quite a bit. He's just too streaky for me to have him any higher than 13, but
yeah,
he'll get you points.
Yeah, I mean, you catch him on an on night, you're glad to have him shooting from that wing, but then you go 2 games like, hey, where'd he go?
2 for 13.
All right, P-Funk, we're up to 13.
It's rough, dude.
Yes, it is. Anthony Bennett still on the board.
Yeah, and it's 1,200 minutes or whatever. Oh my goodness, man! This is
Got a few
terrible,
other
dude.
high picks still up there. Numbers 4, 5, and 6 are all still on the board.
All right, I'm just gonna have to go with it. I don't. Cody Zeller is just so underwhelming. He's right here on my board.
This is the right pick. It's the right pick.
Yeah, it probably is.
Just
Definitely not an exciting pick, but
poor man's Mason Plumlee, I guess.
it's about
There was
right.
definitely a moment this year where he checked into a game for the New Orleans Pelicans, and I fashioned myself as a pretty knowledgeable NBA fan, but that was the moment in time that I learned he played for the New Orleans Pelicans, was him checking into the game. He got playoff minutes for the Heat at times last year. I'm probably underrating him, honestly. It's probably part of this, but yeah, Cody Zeller. I don't. I was about to say he went to North Carolina. That's not even right because I get the Zellers mixed up. So
He was
Yeah.
drafted by a team from North Carolina, so he's got that. But
yes, he was. The Charlotte Hornets continuing a long tradition of drafting poorly.
He went to Indiana, right? His brother Tyler
You are
was the
correct.
North Carolina one, right?
You are correct across the board. So yeah, I mean, it was probably one of these centers in that range was I guess who's left.
The hairline, man.
that's
It's a great
all
hairline.
we're going to request of you.
Cody Zeller is a yearly come on home all first team team member. One of these years, maybe he'll realize it.
I actually feel like Zeller might be a little bit underrated just because he's easy to lump in with like the Michael Jordan draft bust kind of lineage. Like, not that he should have gone 4, but he's had like an okay NBA career if he was like a late lottery guy like he is here.
There is something to that. Like Jaime Jaquez is solid, right? But because he was drafted around 20, I feel like he's almost getting it's like he's being overhyped simply for being drafted lower. And in that vein, Cody Zeller, 4th overall pick. Did he give you 4th overall pick value? No, but for a guy who's played as many years as anybody in this draft, solid player. About it.
I think any other draft, to your point, P-Funk, any other draft, normal draft, him going 13 and looking back on it would be like,
So you're fine. Yeah,
that's all right. That's okay.
All right, Tyler, you're up.
I'd like to trade my pick for next year's first round.
Hey,
Sure,
he
if we're
thinks we're
gonna
going to be
allow
on
it.
it.
I want 2014s.
He thinks we're going to be in 2014, man. He thinks we're going to keep doing this. I like the way he thinks.
Find a
Maybe it's like
desperate
Dante Exum.
Find a desperate team like Presti that really needs a pick and get one of those swaps out of him.
Man, I am looking at my board and I now wondering what the hell I was thinking when I made my board. Because I don't like
I'm having
any
the
of
same
this.
thing. I have a guy who's like decently above the other guys, but I'm really questioning why, and I'm honestly hoping you take him just so I don't have to try to remember why I had him ranked highly. We are at that point in the draft.
You know what? I'm just gonna stick with the theme because I'm a pansy and I'm just gonna go with the guy and I'm gonna contradict myself what I said about Schroeder. I'm gonna take a bad teammate. I'm gonna take a guy that just I don't even like the guy. Michael Carter Williams.
Yeah,
He's gonna have injuries that come up just like Oladipo, but man, rookie of the year, flash in the pan when he came in the league, it was dynamite. Here's this guy's can do it all. He's putting up. I have nothing else to say.
Yeah,
I hate myself right now.
He got an award. I think that's more that can be said of anyone else on the board.
Yeah, I mean,
anytime you can pick somebody that peaked in their first year, you got to.
And I changed my order there because I had him at 18 and I jumped him up just because I didn't like the guys in front of him.
All right. Number 15.
I tell you what, I have a quick interjection, John, because I happened to look at his page on MCW. I'm like, wow, he got traded in his second year, right after winning Rookie of the Year. That's interesting. Convoluted 3-team trade, which actually gets the Sixers to pick that was Mikal Bridges, which would have been great, except the Sixers then traded that pick. Oh man, think of oh my goodness. If you think back and that Jimmy Butler, uh, Embiid, if that team had Mikal Bridges on it too, it's gracious. A trade that was great that then they just blew it up. So anyway, I happened to see that. I figured I would share that little tip. Go ahead with your gem of a pick. Who's next on your board?
I don't know why I'm going with him, but I'm going to go with Nerlens Noel. He was a
Yep.
decent rebounder. Definitely should not have been drafted as high as he was, though. He was considered a giant, like, falling stock guy when he was drafted. He was drafted 6th overall. He was considered, like, a realistic candidate to go number 1. Did not. Kind of dealt with injury problems throughout his career. Got Defensive Player of the Year votes one time, which was not a thing that I had remembered, but for if I can have him as like a role player who can kind of be a 4 or 5 off the bench at number 15, just outside the lottery, I'll take that. That's fine.
Nerlens Noel, didn't he tear his ACL at Kentucky?
He did, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He missed that rookie season.
He was probably going number 1 if he doesn't tear that ACL. If I remember correctly.
If I remember correctly, that was the year Kentucky didn't make the tournament, partially because he got hurt, and so they docked him, kind of in like the Florida State in football this year sort of principle, and then they lost to Robert Morris in the first round of the NIT.
Good times.
Nerlens Noel also turned down a massive extension when he was in Dallas under this guise that he would get more money, which never came. It was like a 4-year, $72 million contract. This is in like 2017. And
Oops.
I don't think he's even come close to making 72 million in the 7 years since then.
I can't imagine.
He even sued his agent. I believe he was with Clutch at the time. He like sued for malpractice. That kind of got a little ugly. I don't think he was sued, but him and the aforementioned Dennis Schroeder, who also did something. He turned down some contract offer to the Lakers of similar ilk and has not recouped it. He's done a little better at least for himself, but some people make some poor agent choices, unfortunately, and Nerlens Noel was at the top of that list. Thunder legend, though.
Jaylen Brown might have a word about his time with like Kanye's group, but
I mean, yeah, maybe, but I mean, Jaylen Brown's doing all right for himself too.
Nerlens will
I believe that
always
was at
be
the time.
that guy. I was just saying, Nerlens will always be that guy that he was the number 1 recruit in his high school class, and before he'd even committed, I was like, this guy's like the future of the NBA. When I saw his like highlights, because at the time he was 6'11", probably like 210, 215, and he's just literally dribbling up the court, just 2-hand dunking, windmilling. Like, this guy's the future. And just like any other high school mixtape, they then start playing against people who look and are more like them. And lo and behold, he never really did anything much after that, I felt.
Yeah. All right, Jason, we're at the point of the draft where you can pretty much draft whoever you want. I don't think we're going to make fun of you too much because, like, really, whatever.
I'm not even going to do the fanfare or anything. Reggie Bullock. He's a decent outside shooter. You know, between him and another guy.
Yeah, what
right
pick
here.
number yet? I had him at 15.
Yeah, I'm getting him at 16. Yeah. So I mean, he's a guy that not great, but he's turned himself in. He's got, from what I in doing research, does seem on his shot definitely quicker release than maybe I would think of a guy this. He's got a good quick release when he shoots the ball. So I don't know. Like we're saying at this point, role player averages 7 points a game for his career or something. But in the evolving NBA today, the importance of the 3-point shots taken, I'll take a guy that can shoot the 3. So
no notes.
So we're now venturing. Yeah, we're now venturing into round 5 of our picks. As long as I don't have to defend my picks, I'm willing to keep going. Depends what you guys are going to make me do. All right.
I can't, no guarantees, but you would also have to really, really reach to make me question whatever's going on. So
I'll
it's
probably
my
pick a
pick.
guy that played in the NBA. Yeah.
There you go. As long as you do that, you should be pretty good. All
All
right,
right,
Tyler.
P-Funk, you're up.
Tyler, I'm going to do it.
Don't do it.
Thunder legend Andre Robertson. I'm locking everybody up with my team. We are not making any shots, but that does not matter.
Yeah.
This
You
version
get
of
other
Andre
guys for
Robertson.
that.
In this version of Andre Robertson's career, he does not slip on the floor in Detroit. He plays many more years, makes all defensive teams, and figures out that corner three. But he was a pretty integral part of those Thunder teams. He essentially replaced Tabo Cephalosha as kind of that two-guard defender alongside Katie and Russ. Was on that team that went to the conference finals. And he was that team that had Melo and PG on it. It took them like 2 months to figure things out. They really figured things out. They were cruising, just wiped the floor with Detroit in Detroit. Towards the end of the game, Robertson goes up for a lob and his knee slips, and that was it. And that was it for that team. Like that team, it sounds crazy with a team with that star power on it, but that team lost Andre Robertson and just played 500 ball the rest of the way. And went out unceremoniously in the first round to the great Rudy Gobert and the Utah Jazz. And unfortunately, Robertson's career was never the same. This go around, he's not going to have that slip, I guess. But man, he was an incredible defender. Just slid his feet so well and gave guys like James Harden fits.
And even if he does have that slip, you're still getting some good years out of him. And if you can get a guy that is that sort of like lockdown defensive player in the mid to late first round, it's hard to dispute it too much.
That is true.
I'll keep it short. I don't think anybody on my team's actually going to hang out with each other. So let's just add another guy to the list of not going to hang out with anybody probably. I'm going to go with Trey Burke.
Wow, that's very big of you as a Kansas fan to do that.
Yeah.
I know. Growth.
Does Trey Burke have a history of
Are you
not being
playing naive or?
Yeah, honestly, maybe I must be missing something clearly.
Just type in pretty much Michigan versus Kansas. And so it turned
No. Sorry. I meant on the maybe what you're referring to was strictly Michigan, Kansas. I thought you made reference to him being like a bad teammate.
No, I'm just saying no. I'm saying like my teammate, the team I've collected individually, they do not look like they would hang out with each other. And Trey Burke
seem like
would not hang out with any of these guys either. It
okay.
has nothing to do with teammate. But yeah, there's nothing to say about Trey Burke. He was a guy that really popped off his rookie year, and then the league figured him out, and then he just has terrible shooting numbers. But I mean, maybe I'm talking myself out of the pick. But
he definitely kept latching on with teams over the years. Kind of like, how is he still getting?
Yeah, but I don't know.
I could see an alternate universe where he's like a decent bench player, but yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah.
All right, so for my next pick, I'm going to go with a young man out of a college in North Carolina by the name of S. Curry. I would like no follow-up questions about which S. Curry I am selecting.
Curry.
I think Steph might have gone a little bit earlier than this, but I'll take Seth Curry. Only guy remaining on my board to have averaged double digits throughout his career. That's pretty much all he can do to the extent that he can do it. I mean, I guess he's fine at that element of the game, but obviously a broke man's version of his brother, but he's been on some decent teams, so taking the second undrafted guy of our redraft. Kind of wild, actually, that just being named Seth Curry was not enough to get drafted somewhere, but we'll go with him at number 19.
Especially looking at some of the names at the end of this draft, it's
Seth Curry, who started
Kazemi?
his career at
Or
Liberty.
Sterling Kazemi? Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I forgot that he started his career at Liberty. All right, I'm
And transferred to Duke.
having second thoughts, but yeah, it's kind of rare that a guy is going to Duke and he goes to the more likable program to play under Coach K. But sure. All right, Jason, you're up.
Oh, goodness gracious. Let's go with just to score points on the board. I'll take Thunder legend Mike Muscala. I seem to have spoiled Thief on Snake's pick. I mean, role playing big man that can step out and hit a shot. Okay.
Dude, I love the Moose pick.
Yeah.
Dude, ultimate locker room guy, pick and pop guy. Yeah, that's a great pick. And he was definitely, as you can see, I was definitely thinking about him. Yeah, I kind of want. I would like to see him make his way back to the Thunder before this is all said and done. I'm hoping it happens. Does anybody else have any Mike Muscala commentary?
Yeah.
I will just say that Mike Muscala played at Bucknell, who once beat Kansas in the first round. So that's 2 of the last 3 picks have been tied to Kansas Killers.
I will say I think that my midnight 2019 free agency, which 2019 free agency ended up being a pretty big turning point in Thunder history. But at midnight at that point, Sam Presti didn't totally know that. And you know where he was? He was in Minnesota at Mike Muscala's house. And that is tremendous. He was like, that's the guy I need to tie this all together. And so they end up signing Mike Muscala and Alec Burks. And then shit hits the fan after that. Russ traded, PG traded. Presti goes to both those guys and says, hey, if you want to do something else, that's fine. Alec Burks said, I'm out of here. But good old Mike Muscala stuck around. And like I said, I hope he does kind of. I would like him to be a member of the Thunder championship winning team in a year or two here. All right, since Jason stole my pick, and we are just absolutely
round 6 we go.
This guy's just a little bit too good for me to leave going. I will have to say my fun pick for next round. Gorgie Jang has probably fallen
next
too
to my
far,
board.
honestly.
That was my next pick.
Yeah.
At this point, so Gorgie Jang, I mean, just my whole team's just a bunch of solid boys, I guess. But yeah, played for Minnesota, primarily for Minnesota. I know he was in San Antonio a little bit too. Yeah, solid big man. Added a 3-point pointer to his game at a good time. Hoping my fellow draftee Steven Adams figures out that he could use a corner 3 at some point in his life. But yeah, Gorgie Jang, that's my pick.
So, yeah, right. A guy who my brother hyped up to me relentlessly. My brother lives in the Louisville area and is a Louisville fan. And I mean, he was just telling me about this guy. And then I saw him play, and it's like, the way he's developed his game throughout. Because even at Louisville, you're like, all right, this guy's still a little raw. He didn't play a ton of basketball, you could tell, but had all the physical tools. And not quite Giannis level, but serviceable, I guess.
Yeah. Because like Peyton Sieve is the guy that I remember from that asterisk national championship winning team, but
yeah,
obviously Gorgie had a much better NBA career.
Wasn't Sieve was in this draft too, right?
He was.
Won't spend too much time on this one either. We can move on pretty fast. I've been taking a lot of guys that flail out or flame out. I think it's a better word or phrase. Let's go with some longevity and an immaculate grid god, playing with 10 different teams. James Ennis III, or as he's called on Basketball Reference, Ennis the Menace. So you either know James Ennis or you don't. I think at 22, I like him.
Yeah. I have no James Ennis III thoughts, but I can't say I really have thoughts about anybody, including the guys I'm about to be taking. So
I am taking down some of these teams, though. I didn't realize he was young Earl Boykins on our hands here.
Yeah, that's who I was thinking of immediately. It was like, oh wait, I'm talking about Earl Boykins, but
I did not realize he had this many teams on his resume. Impressive.
All right, I'm gonna go with a guy who stunning 3.7 VORP for his career, which by the standards of what's remaining here is extraordinary. I'm going to go with the undrafted Daniel Tice. That's all I got. If anyone has any thoughts on him, feel free to share them. Help sell my pick if you want, but I don't care. That's fine.
I think it's good value, honestly. Kind of forgot about him, honestly. Can at times shoot a three ball. Seems to be a good, he's one of those, kind of along the lines of the Mason Plumlees and Kelly Olynyk. It seems like he goes places and does well and contributes and doesn't take anything away.
All right, Jason, you're up.
Oh, just because I told John that I was going to take him my first pick anyway. I'll take Delly. Give me Delly, baby.
Sure.
He's got a championship.
He is last on my board. It says Delly, LOL.
I mean, it's part of it for the meme factor. Yeah.
Of course.
But, I mean, he was a guy who had that, he managed to upstage a little bit of LeBron in the playoffs with some of his stuff. So, he had flashes, and other than that, was a pretty underwhelming guard.
I kind of couldn't believe how underwhelming his advanced numbers were. Not that I thought he was going to be awesome, but man, the advanced numbers hate that guy.
So he has a negative warp, I believe, for his career.
He does, yeah.
Which I was like, huh. Like for a guy who, there's at least maybe more name recognition than maybe some of these other people. But, part of that St. Mary's Australia pipeline. He not quite Patty Mills, I guess, but
and sell some jerseys, get some PFT commenter love based on just having the scrappy white fella. But at number 24, I can't say I'd be too upset about anybody there.
Gotta say I'm not. You can tell that my heart's really in these picks.
Yeah.
Same. All right, P-Funk, your final pick.
I got to take my boy Alex Abrinas.
Yep.
Who is the, fun fact, 7th player who has played for the Thunder in this draft that we have taken. Number 8 being Joffrey Laverne. So, over 10%. I don't know what the exact percent. Over 10% of this draft is, which is pretty funny, considering this draft, as we have mentioned on several occasions. To put it nicely, is underwhelming. But the Thunder kept managing to acquire players from this draft, which is pretty. Abrinas, just kind of like we heard about this guy, then he finally comes over. Kind of 3-point specialist from Spain, and he had like a handful of games in the Russ. He didn't come over until after KD left, which would have been nice to have the 3-point shooter when KD was around. But he had like a couple brief moments with the Russ thing, and then he got some sickness, unfortunately, and he only played like 2 years. But not unlike the Robertson thing, in this version, he doesn't get sick. He plays for many years and hits a bunch of threes.
All right. I'm going to top it off with a guy I think is just a good dude, and I think you should get a shout-out on this draft that we're doing. Tony Snell.
He was on my board.
He's a solid player. I think he's a good dude, and I think good guys shouldn't always finish last on my draft board.
Yeah, and he was decent, like rotational player for a minute with the Bulls. He's definitely not like the best draft pick they ever had, but at 20, it's fine. And
he was infamous for playing that one game where we played like 20-something minutes with no stats whatsoever.
Yes.
Just getting
that is kind of it's not ideal that that's like the defining part of his career, but
it's unfortunate for him. But it's still funny though.
And someone signed the man so he can get his insurance from the NBA.
Yeah, it's unfortunate nobody's stepped up with that.
Maybe this bump will be what we need to get Tony Snell his insurance. God, this is a bleak look at our draft.
Adam Silver listens, guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah, this was the draft that Adam Silver got booed whenever he came on to announce the second round because he was taking over as commissioner. So got to keep up tradition. All right, for my final pick, I'm going to go with a guy that has played 11 seasons in the NBA, which honestly, at this point in the draft, if you a guy that's played every season, not going to argue with it too much. Sorry, Jason, if I'm going to steal your sunshine, but I'm taking Len. Alex Len is my
Nice.
pick. That was a god-awful pun, but
I knew where you were going with
I
it,
think,
though.
yeah, at a guy who was the number 5 pick, obviously, is going to be viewed as a bust. Kind of, honestly, pretty weird, even in hindsight, that he was hyped up like he was, because it's not like he was like a particularly accomplished college player or anything. Basically, was just like a big guy that got drafted, but played over 11,000 minutes in the NBA. Decent rebounder, not really like amazing at anything, really, but a guy in the rotation, it's fine. I actually had a number 22 on my board, which at number 27, I'll take that.
I had him at 19 and was just so bored. I just
Reasonable.
But that's a good pick, and he probably fell a few spots too far.
Yeah. We'll see if Jason takes the one player remaining on my board that hasn't been drafted.
Oh, man. That's a lot of pressure.
To be fair, it's the guy that I have 23rd, so it's not like he's exactly.
Yeah, I mean, between two guys, I don't feel that strongly either. So I'm going to go with the one that I remember playing a little bit more. Been out of league for a year or two now, but I'll take a poor man's of these 3 NDs, but pretty good in his prime. I'll take Solomon Hill to round it out. Just kind of, just another solid role player guy. Hit his shot or two from the outside, play good D for you, and put in the minutes.
23rd on my board. The Abraham's pick was just more fun to make.
Yeah, I didn't have him on my board, but I can't say I really remember why that was. But yeah, decent pick.
So I'm trying to see if I can predict who John still had on his board.
I can honestly say I did.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I can honestly say I didn't have Tony Snell on my board from that game of zeros, and I should have had Tony Snell on my board. So I think that's the one guy that. Got taken out.
Yeah, the one guy on my board that didn't get taken was Alan Crabb. Can't say I really care, but
yeah, that was the one I was silent to Solomon Hill. But it was. I mean, Crabb had some double-digit years, I think, where he's averaging double-digit points. Just
Crabb was another person that the Nets along those Aldo Porter lines. The Nets threw him a giant offer sheet that he had no business. I think he might have. I got to see this one. I can't remember if that got matched. I think all these teams. Tyler Johnson got some ridiculous contract. The Nets and the Heat matched that, and all these teams that matched these offer sheets wanted to trade those players within a year.
Yeah, that seems to be the way it goes.
The Nets were bad. No, I think actually. So yeah, actually that one backfired because the Blazers were like, yeah, you can have him, and then the Nets couldn't wait to get rid of him. Oh man, yeah, because the Nets were bad, but didn't have their own picks, had a bunch of cap space, and well, this is what we're going to do with it. Sign a bunch of offer sheets, dare teams to match it.
Right, so I'm looking back at so we had, I believe there were 3 players who were in the lottery in real life that did not get redrafted here. Number 1, Anthony Bennett, we've joked about. Number 7, Ben McLemore. Honestly, he wasn't a great player, but I feel like his VORP's a little bit exaggerating how bad he was, but maybe I'm just being generous. And then Shabazz Muhammad, who was... The fact that Shabazz Muhammad was the pick right before Giannis is honestly very funny to me, being the guy that had basically the Danny Almonte of college basketball for that year. Yeah, sure.
The hype on Shabazz at UCLA was crazy. And
I believe he was the number 1 recruit in his class.
He was, yeah. I think that was partly because of the age discrepancy thing, but
yeah, with Ben McLemore as the resident Jayhawk here, even at Kansas, it was like so streaky. And then going into the draft, I mean, I remember hearing people even saying like, "Hey, Ben McLemore could go number 1," and that's when you knew it was a bad draft because in no universe should Ben McLemore ever go number 1. Because it's not that I don't think he's a good player. He is just not. There was just I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah, I actually
He's a
liked
pickup
him
guy.
coming out. I liked him coming out, but yeah, I did not think that he was a number 1 pick kind of guy. But then again, I didn't think Oladipo and Porter were either. And it turns out that Giannis and Gobert are really the only guys who, like, with hindsight, you would think would be at that sort of level. One of the highlights of rewatching the draft with regards to Gobert was clearly Bill Simmons did not know who Rudy Gobert was when he got drafted, but they were going through like his measurables and like his like workouts and like how big his wingspan was and his reach and stuff. And then Simmons is just like, "Oh my! How did he not go number 1 overall? Look at these numbers!" And it sounds like very much like dumb guy getting excited about something very quickly, which I mean it was, but also he wasn't wrong. So I mean, not that Gobert should have gone number 1, with all due respect to your number 2 pick, Tyler, but yeah, obviously a very good career. Does anyone have any more thoughts on anybody else that we have not discussed, other than Mizzou legend Alex Oriaki and his being drafted super late and not really doing anything?
Yeah, I'm trying to see here. I think Alex Abrinas is the draft. How do I say this? The fewest minutes played by a drafted player in our draft. Maybe I'm trying to go back through and look at minutes played because I was curious about that.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I would believe that.
He's at
So-
2,777 career minutes.
Okay, yeah. So I didn't have him on. I actually didn't have him on my board. The lowest minutes I have on my board is Daniel Tice at 6,763. So pretty decent gap
And
there.
Arenas is still 800 minutes ahead of Anthony Bennett.
Yeah, man. Do we want to talk about Anthony Bennett for a second? Because I feel like we
Actually,
just kind of like
Real quick,
glossed over
we
that
can.
whole thing.
Real quick, I have the 2 lowest on the board because second lowest is Andre Robertson at 6,800. Third is James Ennis the third at 8,022.
Mhm.
And then I would have had fourth if Jason didn't snipe me with Mike Muscala. But yeah, Anthony Bennett, man, what happened?
So at UNLV, he was really good. Like he was a really good player. I think people just talked themselves into it because they saw his size and they went, "Oh, we can do something with this." And I believe that there were some things that were going to hinder his career in terms of, if I remember correctly, as an asthma issue. Not holding that against anybody that has asthma, but obviously playing a 82 game season and expected to play 32 minutes a game, it's a lot. So it's unfortunate his career didn't do anything better. And shout out to the meme of him holding up, 0 points in the Wilt Chamberlain graphic.
Yeah, the Cavs are just lucky that LeBron came along. They were able to dump him off and win a title and forget that ever happened, or else that would be a much bigger deal.
Yeah, the fact that they had consecutive years with the number 1 overall pick and they essentially just traded both of them like right away. And obviously, Kyrie worked out, but between Anthony Bennett, who's an all-time bust, and Andrew Wiggins, who's better than Anthony Bennett, but is certainly not what you would consider a high-end number 1 overall pick, despite the Bill Simmons claim that he's a potential Hall of Famer. But that's a whole rant that I don't want to get into because it's stupid and boring, primarily. Probably have said way too many words about some completely irrelevant players, so we can probably get this wrapped up. Tyler, P-Funk, thank you both very much for joining us. We'll have to have you back for more NBA drafts or otherwise, because we know you guys are not only NBA people, so we'll get that figured out off air. Tyler, where can people find you?
Now you can find me on Twitter at KaiSlim90. I provide riveting content. I really don't, but please follow.
You're on there. You have comments on sports and what have you. All right, P Funk, where can the fine folks find you if they don't know who you are already?
Yeah, you can also find me on Twitter if you so choose. P_Funk36. Mostly basketball, but I'll comment on anything, honestly. So, beware.
Yeah, and if anyone's looking at following me on social media, you shouldn't, because social media is toxic and bad. But John JF125, so each their own.
Yeah, and be sure to follow the podcast as well at Draft Day Pod on Twitter. And if you want to become my, part of my elite group of followers, which I think I have like 6 of now, you can
Nice.
follow me at Draft Day Dadshaw on the Twitter X, whatever it's called.
The 5th edition of Jason Bradshaw's Twitter account?
I think this is 7, if we're being completely honest, but
Isn't.
it let's just say it's very rarely used. It's I can't sleep in the middle of the night, or I was a lot happier without it, though. I'll be completely honest with you, even though I know I was sorely missed from the community. But that's neither here nor there. Also, be sure to check us out on Facebook. Leave us a comment, review on Spotify. Helps out a lot. Spread the word. If you have any ideas, reach out to us. Give us ideas like Tyler did, and you can end up on an episode with us. But yeah, if nothing else, thanks for listening, and we will see you for the next draft, guys.
Yeah, see ya.
Hey, it's John, and turns out that in our excitement of spending over an hour and a half on a draft that none of us really considered to be all that good of a draft, I forgot to recap the picks. So just to make sure everybody has a succinct knowledge of how everyone drafted, P-Funk drafted Giannis Antetokounmpo, Steven Adams, Robert Covington, Cody Zeller, Andre Robertson, Gorgie Jang, and Alex Abrinas. I think I got those names right. Tyler had Rudy Gobert, Victor Oladipo, Kelly Olynyk, Michael Carter-Williams, Trey Burke, James Ennis III, and Tony Snell. I, John, had C.J. McCollum, Otto Porter Jr., Contavious Caldwell-Pope, Nerlens Noel, Seth Curry, Daniel Tice, and Alex Len. Jason had Mason Plumlee, Dennis Schroeder, Tim Hardaway Jr., Reggie Bullock, Mike Muscala, Matthew Dellavedova, and Solomon Hill. And you have now officially listened to enough on the 2013 NBA draft, and we will probably get you a deeper draft next time, but we'll see. Bye.